Jim Lehrer is here. For almost 30 years, he has been a fixture of public television. His program, The News Hour with Jim Lehrer, airs each weeknight on public television. He has been a writer for even longer. In 1966, he published his first novel, Viva Max. Since that time, he has written 13 books, 2 memoirs, and 3 plays. His most recent novel is No Certain Rest. I am pleased to have my best friend, my good friend. You could be my best friend.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
Back at this
I'm
table.
honored. That's a great slip. You can make that any time you want to, Charlie.
Thank you, sir, for coming.
Yep.
No Certain Rest. What's it about?
No Certain Rest is about an archaeologist for the National Park Service who's given the job to identify the remains of a Union soldier found like yesterday near the battlefield at Antietam, near Sharpsburg, Maryland. Antietam was, of course, the bloodiest day in U.S. military history, 1862, September. The Union soldier was buried face down, his hands tied behind him. He had been shot through the base of his skull. And the archaeologist given a job to find out who was he, why was he shot that way, because most people are not buried that way. And so that's the kind of the forensic mystery.
Questions arisen about whether he deserved to be shot that way.
Yeah, right? And there was
whether it was an execution for other reasons.
Yeah, and there was nothing in Civil War history where the Confederates executed any prisoners or vice versa. So what was the story? Anyhow, this guy, this archaeologist, runs the story down. So that's one part of the novel, the detective story, more or less, and then it's the story about what actually happened on the battlefield that day. And that battle began at 7 a.m. on that day, and it ended at 7 p.m., and when it was over 23,000 young kids from the North and the South were either dead or wounded. That's why I say bloodiest day in American military history. Anyhow,
just walking towards each other.
Toward each other, and blunders by generals, particularly on the Union side, were unbelievable. They held 400 riflemen from the Confederates on a bank overlooking a little bridge, held off 10,000 Union soldiers for 5 hours just because these stupid Union generals kept sending these kids over this narrow bridge. And that's what this is about. It's about that bridge. In fact, the cover has a copy of the bridge.
Oh, yeah, look at it.
That's
the
bridge. Yeah, that's the bridge. No Certain Rest comes from the idea, Charlie, that there are some pieces of ground in our country that because of what happened on those pieces of ground, it was so jarring, so monumental, so calamitous that there can never be rest there. And Antietam is one of them, and there are others, of course. And that's where
you think Ground Zero maybe one of them?
Ground Zero is one of them. The Pentagon's one of them. That field in outside Shanksville, Pennsylvania, is another. And there are other Gettysburg. Yeah. There are places like that well, it's kind of. The term I always shimmy. Yeah, it kind of shimmies with it. Yeah, it's a good word. Right. It's our kind of word.
Right. It is, exactly.
And you feel it, and World Trade Center will always be that way as well.
There is no sense of exactly what will happen there. I mean, it is the most difficult and perplexing issue here in New York. Because the people in power want to make sure that the area lives, you know, so it needs commerce and it also needs people living there. You know, at the same time, there's a 16-acre spot there, you know, and it's certainly where the World Trade Center stood is hallowed ground. Hallowed ground.
Civil War term.
Ground.
You bet.
You know?
You bet. You bet.
And so it's, same thing.
Yeah. They can't do there what they did at Antietam, what they've done at Gettysburg, what they've done at Shiloh, some of these other places, and they've done at Normandy. You know.
What do you make of the fact that this last week we have seen Scowcroft and others raise questions about the president preemptive strike against Iraq?
Well,
Dick Armey and others.
Yeah. Well, as you know, Charlie, those are the kinds of questions I ask rather than answer. But I say this, I'm a big believer in there being national public debates about things that huge. And I think whether it's Scowcroft or on one side or Cheney on the other side or the president on one side and somebody else on the other side, Chuck Hagel on the other side, whatever, the public, the country should be involved in this debate. This is the first major, huge issue for us as a country to deal with. We've never done this before. We've attacked other countries before. We've done a lot of things similar, but we have never, ever gone into attacking a country because of what they might do.
Right.
And I'm not saying they shouldn't do it, but it's something that everybody should be involved in on the takeoff.
Do
you want everybody there at the end?
The landing, you want to take off.
Exactly.
Do you believe we'll have that national debate?
I think so. I really do.
Because you have hearings by Biden in the Foreign Affairs already. I mean, experts coming in there.
Exactly.
Now you have Scowcroft writing an op-ed piece for the Wall Street Journal.
Mm-hmm.
Kissinger, who's more supportive of the president, somehow his view got a little bit misinterpreted.
I think they did get misinterpreted, right. In all fairness to him. I think that the newspapers around the country, I understand, are writing about this a lot more. Editorial page editors are weighing in. Radio talk shows are talking about. This is terrific. This is what this country ought to be doing. It's what we ought to be talking about instead of a lot of other things. And I don't. I'm from my perspective, I don't care how it ends. I just want to make sure that everybody's involved. I don't want to. It's not my job to make sure, but I think it's good for our country.
Yeah, I think. Do you think the president would welcome that?
He may not have at one time, but my impression is now that he would welcome it because he does understand that that he's got to have the people with him.
Right.
And the only way you get people with him is to open it up and to say, okay, let me explain to you. In other words, go on national TV and say, now look, here's why I think we should do this. Yeah. And then somebody else say, here's why I don't think we should do it. And what do you think? And I don't mean put it to referendum. I'm not talking about referendum government, but I am talking about public debate government.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people who want to make sure that all those ideas are out there and that the hard questions are asked. That's and they want to be convinced that the president, has considered all these things.
Exactly right.
Not that he shouldn't make the decision, that he was elected to make the decision with counsel as to what we do in our national interest.
None of these people that I'm aware of, these big-name people who are opposed to this, are saying, don't do it.
Are saying exactly
They're saying exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Mr. President, consider this, please. Right. We assume you are, but in case you're not.
Yeah. And many of them saying, I'm not in the end objecting to changing the regime. I just want to make sure that we have a strategy.
That's right.
That we have done everything we can to bring on board allies, that we have a sense of what we would do after.
That's right.
All of that.
And the potential price of getting this done.
What else is on the national agenda today other than Iraq, corporate scandals, and that whole issue about how to come to grips with credibility of American corporations? What else? Those are the two big ones from where I sit.
Those are the two big ones. Corporate credibility is tied into the economy generally, and people being left behind. That's a basic.
Feeling something unfair that he always sensed but didn't believe that other guys, that some guys were, or some people were.
That's right. And I think that the corporate responsibility issue is brought the second issue to a point now where, if you're running a company or you're thinking about running a company, if you're in politics or in public life, you have to consider accountability in a way that you never had to before. That's a very healthy development. That open sky kind of thing, let's all get rich and, I'll get a little richer than everybody else, and don't bother me, I won't bother you, you don't bother me, we'll just all get rich together. That's over as a result of this, and it's over till it happens again. These things
seem to go in cycles, doesn't it?
Exactly right. But other than that, I happen to believe, and here again, you and I have talked about this before, and I feel very strongly about it, and the Iraq thing fits into this. I think the overriding issue for our country right now is we are the most powerful nation in the world. There's never been anybody like us at any given time in history. And it has to do with military power, it has to do with political power, economic power, whatever. How?
Unrivaled, unchallenged.
Exactly. How are we going to exercise this power?
I couldn't agree more.
And everybody in America should be talking about it.
Right.
And then we elect our leaders and let them do it.
It ought to be part of the debate.
Just what you said. You bet. I mean, and the preemptive strike is part of that. But there are a lot of other things, too. I mean, when you have tremendous power, just like you live on the neighborhood, and if you're the biggest guy, I bet you were always the biggest guy in your neighborhood, weren't you? Yeah.
Yes.
You could afford to be generous, couldn't you? More so than if I was always the little guy. And what does that mean for us as a country? I'm not here trying to load the answers, but all these are the kinds of things we should be talking about. I mean, do we have what are our obligations to help out folks? I mean, talking about internationally now, as well as our own folks who are not as well off. These are all the things that we can afford to debate in a way that doesn't infringe on anybody's whatever, because we're so powerful. That power is only as good as it is exercised. And we should be debating
I
that.
couldn't agree more. And what is our responsibility to those? You know, you can take any issue like AIDS and poverty and, you know, a whole sense of how can there be, how do we justify our own great fortune?
That's right.
You know, in consideration, and how do we use it? And what is it that we owe to those issues? Do we owe our ingenuity? What is it we owe? And when you start talking owing people to share whatever, to share our model, to share the principles and values we believe in.
What we believe in.
Right.
And it's people like you and me, and political leaders. It's our responsibility to raise these issues. It's a cop-out. The American people don't care about this. Well, those of us who have the microphones, those of us who have the ears, people's ear, we should talk about it.
If they don't care, we bear responsibility.
Exactly right. We should if I care as much as I just said I cared, and I should be doing something about it. I'm trying my little best, my little best on our little program, but everybody should be doing it if we care.
And the idea is to say, how do I be? I mean, the challenge is to be, how do I be as creative and as savvy and as smart as I can to present ideas that are compelling, so that you're not putting people to sleep. So you can't sit there and bore people and say, this is good for you. Take this medicine.
Take two of these and be in favor of aid.
It is the idea of saying, I owe it to find a way to present information that is so compelling people will sit up and be moved by it.
And be able to identify their interest in this issue.
Exactly.
That is the key to it. And that's your responsibility, my responsibility, people in public lives, politics, etc.
Jim Lehrer, No Certain Rest. There are few people I admire more than Jim Lehrer, and that says it all. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Always a pleasure.
All right.